We met in a friend's kitchen. So I dropped down to see a friend that we knew independently, and Brian arrived at the door, having come back from a holiday. And I instantly disliked him. Enormously, like I just thought he was immature and loud, and you were.
Oh, I was, absolutely, yeah.
And it was probably a few years later.
About 5 years later.
5 years later, we met again, just out with people who knew each other, and ended up sitting together, and we had an actual conversation and got on very well. And after that, it was talking. We just bumped into each other at several different places, and we would end up sitting talking.
Chatting a lot,
for hours.
And we're 13 years married this September. So, good stretch. Our marriage was effectively over.
Yeah.
I've gone through a life of alcoholism and addiction. And it eventually took its toll on us, you know. And we had been effectively separated for a good year, maybe a year and a half.
We were living in the same house with the benefit of having the space, but sleeping in separate rooms, even using separate bathrooms. The only thing we spoke about was the children, only as necessary. Yeah. But other than that, we were living entirely separate lives. Yeah. And there was a chasm in between us. Yeah, and absolutely. A huge amount of anger there as well. Yeah. I mean, I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't want to have to look at him anymore. And the only reason we were still living in the same house is because the kids were completely unaware of the issues that Brian had gone through, and didn't want to unnecessarily harm them. The
marriage course really brought us back together and put that cement back into the foundations of our marriage, you know. Yeah.
So for me, it was kind of, well, we'd do the marriage course, and if any little shoots start to spring up from that, then we can do real marriage counselling. But it wasn't needed. It was like what we experienced in the marriage course. It's not just that it brought us back to how we used to feel about each other. We had never had this relationship. No,
this is a whole new, in the 19 years coming up on that we're together, the last almost 21 months, I've never seen you so happy. I've never experienced our marriage being as solid as it is today. Mm. It's phenomenal. It's brand new. It really is like a new beginning that we've had given to us through this, you know.
I realised that we hadn't sat and looked at each other for years. Yeah. And that in itself, and then of course everything we were saying to each other was positive, which is not only lovely to hear from your partner, but it's lovely to put yourself in that position. It put all of the rubbish away, all of the negative stuff and all of the hurt, and we were able to just leave that outside. We had probably gotten to that place that a lot of couples get to, although most couples don't have quite the problems that we had. But along with that, we had that very ordinary thing with, as kids came along and we're both working and busy and trying to kind of keep a household going at the same time, that we were doing a lot of handing off. I'd take the kids out so that Brian could get stuff done. He'd take the kids off because I had work to do. And it was that. It was like we were
passing each other by.
Yeah, and passing to each other. Whereas now we do things together as a family, which seems so normal and so obvious, but we were trying to be so efficient with our time that we just split each other, split from each other.
Highly recommend. Yeah.
And not just for people who are on the verge of divorce, you know, because we did it with two other couples. It was quite a small group when we were doing it. And the other two couples weren't in crisis, but they still got a huge amount out of it. Yeah. It is a moment of privacy and intimacy that every marriage should have.